Here's a few tips on using the Tone Curve tab to tackle tricky exposures. Now here we can see the shot is tricky because you've got really blown out highlights here, and you've also got some very washed out shadows, so we need to tweak those, and we could try using recovery sliders to attack the highlights there and restore detail. We could try boosting the blacks using this slider here, but an alternative way to tackle specific tones and tweak them is to use the Tone Curve tab, which you'll find up here. If you go to Point, then you can see specific points on the curve. If we drag any of these points upwards, it will brighten those particular areas, or we drag them down, it'll darken things. Now we need to actually tackle specific areas like these highlights here, and that's the top right of the curve. So we click up there and drag that down, then that reduces the strength of the highlights and gets rid of the clipping. So the top right of the tone curve is the highlights, the bottom left is the shadows, and everything else in between is scales of grayscale. So we can actually try and get some of these darker shadows even more dark by remapping them to darker values by dragging down at the bottom there. But it's quite tricky to target the exact area, so Control Z to undo that. And there's a new tool in Photoshop called the Targeted Adjustment tool, which you can get by pressing T, and if we click on there, then we can actually go to an area like the shadows that we want, maybe this dark jacket here, click, and then drag left to darken that specific area, or drag right to lighten it. So that's a really cool way of targeting a specific tonal range and adjusting its level instead of having to press points on the curve like so. Now if you don't have CS4, you still have a similar way of using a targeted adjustment option by actually holding Control and moving the cursor over the screen. And as you see, if we go to a grayscale thing here, we're near the middle of the curve, shadows are now down the bottom, highlights are up near the top, so you can actually place a point like so, click, there's a control point exactly at the area to deal with exactly the right range of tones, and you can lighten them by going up or darken them by coming down. So that's a cool way of targeting and adjusting specific tones without using CS4.